go with service, but I would make the service standard such where it was unpaid if you were not in the military. If you were in the military, you could be paid. That would be fine. Military service, I think, would be a fine way to do it. But I also think that you would have to take into account the draft. So because only men can be drafted, they're the only ones who have that force applicator. I don't see why they shouldn't get the additional privilege of being allowed to vote over women, for instance. I think that there's tons of things which are required of men that are not of women, and yet for some reason men get no special privileges from the fact that they do those things, and women do not and are exempted from doing those things, which is insane to me. So if we're going to have a system where both men and women can vote, which is fine, then at least make it based along some type of unpaid service if you're non-military. And then you will see that most of the people who are in these positions are men anyway, because women are not going to take a 6-year unpaid fucking job so that they have stake in the nation. It's not going to do it.
No, but I'll tell you what they would do. They might take an 18-year job, which is why I was saying that my standard has to do with sacrifice of your life or risk of your life in service of the nation. And women do that. Some women do that by choosing to give birth, because what is the state ultimately? The state is ultimately its citizenry. It's the people that occupy the state.
So what? They need the genetic material from men, and they need men to be working so that they can stay at home so that we can have the best and brightest in our future. We're only going to get the best and brightest in the future if we have the smartest women at home raising children, not in the fucking workforce slaving away in a cubicle.
No, but the problem is that when you tell those women not to go to college, when you tell those women not to go to school, what actually happens is that they make less money. And because they make less money, and because as a whole, that means that their kid goes to a worse school. That means that their child is more likely to go to a worse neighborhood.
If you took all women in the workforce tomorrow, what would happen to men's wages, ma'am?
They probably, you're talking about the family wage, and I wouldn't disagree with you that it probably would be the case.
That's right.
But you know what else?
No, I want you to answer the question. What would happen to men's wages if you pulled all women out of the workforce tomorrow? What would happen?
They would increase, and women and children's
safety
in society would decrease.
Would it be drastically increase?
I don't think that it would be, no. I think that it would probably
be a drastic increase that now suddenly you had to fill that big of a labor force?
Think about when we're thinking about like the jobs that women occupy within the labor force, like education, childcare, cosmetology. When we're thinking about OBGYN,
they're absolutely desperate to have men in.
Okay, well, first of all, that's not necessarily true. Like when
it is necessarily true.
When we're thinking about when we're thinking about gynecology, for instance, it might be the case that there are some men that do well. It might be the case that some women prefer that, but young women, very young women, overwhelmingly prefer to have a female OBGYN to come and serve them. And what would happen is if there was a mass exodus of men who joined the workforce and a mass exodus of women who left the workforce, then even the stay-at-home mom with her kid at home would be less safe, because now she can't hire a female nanny, she can't hire a female
so the idea here,
kindergarten teacher, a female.
I get it. The idea here, though, is not to remove all women from the workforce. The idea here would be over time to gradually contract them away from the workforce so that men's wages went up so that we had a family wage. And the best way that we could do that is if we had representation voting for the best and brightest so that we stopped, getting involved in every fucking foreign war, electing nothing but Democrats, focusing our resources on abortion and security over individual freedoms and all of this madness. The best way to secure the future for women is to make sure that men are the primary dictates of how the society is run, and by gradually contracting women in the labor force. Yeah, absolutely so. Women vote away the very rights that we're talking about here. It would be women who would vote away your rights long before men do. Men are known to be risk takers. Women are known to vote Democrat. All they care about is fucking abortions. All they care about is abortions and getting naked on the internet. I don't hear them advocate for guns or individual freedoms or any of that ever. No woman's point to me a feminist woman's collective that's actually advocating for individual freedoms anywhere. They don't exist.
I will advocate for women to stop working as of tomorrow so that I don't have to go in. That would be great if we could pass that now. And Law Dog comes in with the $20. He explains the cut flower. He says, a society founded on Christian values, which
the United States is still landlocked away from all of its enemies. Okay. It would be utilitarian, sure.
Okay. So one more thing too, right? I mean, this is another thing, like we've already, like you mentioned, like the birth rate and the fact that like people can't reproduce, like we can't reproduce ourselves. And I think like it's important to bring this up on like one of the problems, like with why like women's rights, it's not just like a flavor of the week type of issue. Okay. I understand that usually like when we talk about women's rights, we usually talk about them in conjunction with it feels like a flavor of the week issue. Like the next week we talk about like the history of slavery, the history of racism, the history of like homophobia, et cetera, but it's not different. And I'm going to tell you why it's different.
That sounds like some Twitch brain shit.
Okay. Well,
are you a Twitch streamer?
I'm a failed one at that.
Okay.
But
yeah, but I mean, that sounds like Twitch does it that way, right? Twitch will do like, oh, we're going to make up some fucking bullshit topic and have 5 lefties and 1 right winger we can pile on. That's how Twitch politics does it. But in the actual mainstream of actual, discourse in politics, we follow national trends, and that's usually where the discussions align, not with like Twitch poll brain.
Okay. Well, but I'm merely trying to say that like women's rights are a different issue, because I think that when women specifically are, and it doesn't matter, we can argue about like what a right is, like we can go through that and cross the Rubicon, but if we can just get to the part where we say that countries that say that they have like that they do better at like advocating for women's rights, we see that those countries tend to do better. We see that they have higher GDP per capita. We see that the health is better for like women and for men and for their children. We see that overall those societies seem to be healthier, wealthier, and wiser in comparison to other countries where they have higher rates of religiosity. And so it's sort of weird to me that we're talking about like leading to a better society and like what a good society, and we don't want to fuck civilization over. But when I look actually at like the poorest countries in the world, and when I look at like the richest countries in the world, it seems as though income is correlated with. Well,
let me help you out with how crazy and insane this argument is, their destiny. So just to explain it to you so that you understand, all those same nations that you're talking about were still right the best and the most prosperous, and they did the bestest out of everybody on planet Earth when they were the most religious too. Can you answer to me why that was the case?
Can I answer to you like why the United States and why the United Kingdom, why these places were better? Like why are you telling me
still the bestest in the whole wide world, even when they were the most religious? Right? So the thing is when you say, oh, but now there's a separation between church and state and they're more secular, and look at how prosperous they are. They always were, even absent. And this is it's because it's based around resources and it's based around being landlocked. So, for instance, if we had a King Washington in the United States is still landlocked away from all of its enemies. Okay, totally landlocked away, has a vast, huge swath of resources at its disposal. If we had a King Washington and it was a monarchy in the United States, it would thrive just as much as it did under a republic, perhaps even more so. And all of these nations that you point to where you're like, oh, they're the most egalitarian and they're doing the better out of everybody. Well, back when they weren't, they were still doing better out of everybody. So how can you square those two things? I'd like to know.
Okay. Well, one, I would say that like back in the day, what you're referring to, most people were religious. It was not the common position to be an atheist. And just as a reminder to everyone here, okay, atheist is not a synonym with secular, okay?
So secular with atheism?
I'm saying that like secular is not a synonym for atheism.
Well, what's it a synonym for? What does secular mean if not agnostic atheism?
My understanding is that it means like it means religious and irreligious pluralism. So what it means is that you live in conjunction in a society with people that have different religious or maybe perhaps no religious beliefs in conjunction with you. So you live in a society.
The society you live in?
Yes, that's a secularist. Yes, I'm a secularist, correct. And that's what a society is. But that doesn't mean, right, that everyone within the society is an atheist, okay? That doesn't mean, right, that people that have religious virtues or have religious things can't advocate for it.
The question was, when you say, but when I look at the nations that are the most egalitarian and they have the most rights appropriated to the most amount of people, they're doing better than all the other nations. Okay, that's true. But that was also true when that wasn't the case. So how do you square those two things?
I think what I would say to you is that like those countries that you're talking about, I think that they were still relatively more secular in comparison to the other countries like that you're referring to. And I also think that
that the Catholic Church, just to get this right, you think that when Europe was essentially ruled by the Catholic Church was still doing better than everybody else still doing better than everybody else, that they were less religious than who? What society can you point to that was less religious than Europe under the Catholic Church? Name one.
That was less religious than Europe and the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
I can't recite it off the top of my head, but what I can tell you is that, like, even, and this has been the historic problem for Christianity for decades.
Go ahead.
I mean, you can laugh at it, okay? But like, I'll tell you, like, the real reason, like, why people will support feminism and why they support women's rights, it's not because, like, people are super woke bros, and it's not because people are super, like, the way it's usually been framed. It's because it puts more money in your pocket. It's the same, like, I see this all the time. Like, when, like, I've watched the Whatever podcast. I've seen people go and ask men, like, who date OnlyFans stars, how could you possibly be dating this woman? You know, she's an OnlyFans star. And then she, at the next minute word out of her mouth is, oh, I made $500,000 last year, an ungodly amount of money. And the truth is, for a lot of people, when you have a lot of money, when you live in a wealthier society, when you have access to more resources, even if it's something that you don't feel entirely comfortable, a lot of people are willing to say, you know what? That's okay, honey. Buy me the yacht. Buy me the house.
I guess we should dictate outcomes of society and this moral degeneracy, which has led to a mass hysteria of people experiencing a loneliness epidemic, which is just as high for women as it is for men, experiencing millions of dead children every single year, not being able to reproduce, and having uncharted rates of people who are under depression and under psychiatric medication so that you can make more fucking money taking your top off. It's like, that's just the stupidest shit on planet Earth.
Yeah, but
right?
The reproduction point is moot, and the reason why it's moot is because how do you account for, like, the lack of reproduction? Answer: you import labor. Immigration is how we resolve
what
the problem
do you do,
of a lack of
when the countries you're importing from are having the same reproduction crisis? What do you do then? Because they're having the same reproduction crisis under secularism. The country whose labor you want to import are also shrinking in size. What do you plan on doing about that in 100 years?
I don't think the human civilization is going to die in 100 years, and I also think that people
that live,
I think that people who live in those very poor countries, I think that those.